All right, thank you for joining us for our tour today. For those of you who are joining us on Facebook, thank you for being patient as we waited for our in-person RSVPs to arrive. And same for those of you who are joining us here in the gallery. And as always, if you ever have any questions, either here in the gallery or on Facebook, feel free to pop up your hand in person and ask, or on Facebook, type your question in and we'll answer it throughout the tour. My name is Elizabeth Kilmer, and I work here at the Fort Wayne Museum of Art giving our adult tours, and I'm excited to be able to talk to you guys about Dale Enochs sculpture today. Dale is a Fort Wayne native. He grew up here in Fort Wayne. He attended the old Fort Wayne Art School when it was down on Berry Street, and he eventually finished his degree at Indiana University, Bloomington, and he has stayed in Bloomington. He's still based there. He works out of a 19th century barn in his backyard, so he's very much a hometown artist. He loves being in the Midwest, but that doesn't mean that he hasn't looked beyond his own surroundings for his sculpture. While he works with Indiana limestone, he's very influenced by cultures that are non-Western. He and his wife have traveled throughout Asia and Africa, and he's very interested in how you can bring ideas of meditation and introspection and different thoughts about the body into his work. And we're going to look at some of those different themes and different sculptures that we have on display here. But the first thing we're going to do with his work is just kind of look at the surface, and we can spread out over here amongst this piece. This gold piece here is called Alchemical Studies, and it's a good one because we can all kind of spread out and look at our own individual pillar. And you'll notice that Dale's work has a myriad of patterns and different paths all over the surface, and that is something that you'll see throughout all of his sculpture. Even the areas that look like they would be smooth all have a different pattern etched into it. And that is Dale's way of showing the beauty of limestone. Because when he first graduated, he had wanted to work in ceramics, but you can't work in ceramics without a kiln, and he didn't have access to a kiln. But what he did have access to was an abundance of limestone being in Bloomington. Because that's where most of Indiana limestone comes from, is central Indiana. And at first he wasn't too thrilled about it. It wasn't what he wanted to work in, but the more he worked with the material and started really looking at what it could offer, he realized all of the different depths you can find within the stone. The color can range from a soft creamy yellow to rich pinks and golds. And you can also see like different colors and different glinting specks in it as the different minerals of the limestone come out. And he shows that and showcases these different attributes through the different textures that cover the surfaces of his sculptures. But these textures and these labyrinths also have another purpose, and that ties into meditation. Dale begins every workday with a short meditation in his studio without fail. And as it's an important aspect of his own life, he also brings that through into his artwork. As we have all of these different paths, kind of like a maze, you kind of find yourself following the lines and seeing where they will take you. And as a result, you kind of come into your own introspective and meditative state as you follow all these paths that Dale has taken you on. And as you go through, you'll start to notice that there are different shapes held within those patterns as well. In alchemical studies, you have triangles and squares and circles, but in many of the other sculptures within this exhibition, you'll find other small different details that you wouldn't have seen before. Some of them, like cartouche over here, has words written on it. And the same can be seen in almost anything that you come across. There's always some little hidden gem that is like a reward for the viewer who takes their time to really dig into what's in the surface of the sculptures. Does anyone have any questions so far? Okay, if I can draw your attention over here, we have something that's very unique in this exhibition. Now, the pieces that we have looked at so far have been private pieces or solo commissions that Dale has either sold or he's looking to sell, or even some have been created for himself. But he also works extensively in public art, not just private commissions. And public art is something that's kind of a mystery to a lot of people. Like, we see sculptures that have been created for parks or for courtyards, but we don't really think about how those get there. What are all the different steps that an artist has to go through to get a work created and then on display? Excuse me. And we are fortunate that Dale is a meticulous keeper of all of his different public art pieces, and we have numerous maquettes for various public pieces. And these range from his first public art commission in the 1980s, soon after he had graduated from school, up into pieces that have been finished in the last couple years. Excuse me. And in these pieces, everything is created to scale. Like we have here with this plaza proposal, he thought about everything that was going to be part of this work. It would have been a water feature where the water came out and then came down and settled into this shallow little basin here. And we see how he was going to incorporate other natural elements of rock in the landscape. But you'll also notice that this piece is noted as being unrealized. And unrealized means that it didn't come to be in its finished form. And there are a variety of reasons why this can happen. When you're creating a public sculpture, the artist isn't beholden only to themselves. They're also tied to the committee where they were creating, who was in charge of the work they're creating. And a myriad of different things can happen. The committee can change their mind of what they wanted from this public sculpture, or also funds could fall through, and then the artist can be left with pieces of a work, but it just never got installed. And that's what happened here with Prometheus Walk. Dale had, as you can see from the images up here, the top one is the man right down here, Prometheus. He has been created, he was finished, and all of the bases were ready for the sculpture, but it just never got installed. And in addition to seeing these different models, Dale was also gracious enough to lend us his working drawings as well. And here we can really see the working of the artist's mind, especially with this piece here for Axis. This sculpture was realized, and we can see it here, and we can see how his model was a direct translation to what finally got made. It wasn't just some little sketch like, oh, it'll be something like this, and just kind of throw it out. He had thought through the entire process. And we see here how he really does think about any little issue that could arise, any different faults or cracks in the stone, how closely all of the different pieces are going to come together and sit. And we see that everything is taken into account for Dale. And the same is true for all of these public works here along the back. And when he's creating his public sculptures, he always thinks about the area that the sculpture is going to be. That is especially true for this piece here, which is called Bloomington Banquet. This is down in Bloomington, and when this committee was trying to think of a sculpture they would want to be in this courtyard area, Dale was like, well, what is this area for? And it's an area where they have a farmer's market and food trucks often come on the weekends. And so he thought, well, people are gathering for food. They're gathering for communion. And so he created this massive table and chairs. And we also have his little model down here who he refers to as Joe Schmo. And he is to scale. So if you're the average man, this is about where your head would come up on that sculpture. And we can see a couple other men who were created to scale as well for all of the different sculptures here. And we had talked about how sculptures that are unrealized, sometimes those ideas stick around. They don't just get thrown to the wayside when the sculpture falls through. And we can see how those ideas can come to pass with a sculpture like this. We had Prometheus Walks over there, which did not come to be, but then we also have Stride. And this is a public work that was created, and we can see here how Dale worked through this new element that he's brought into his work, which is aluminum. And we see here how with the stone he cuts into everything, but with the aluminum he cuts through. And he's able to add this different element of depth that we see here with these transparencies that are laid on top of each other. And while we have Stride, which is also located in Bloomington, these different ideas also translated to this private piece called Stride 2. And with these, as you look through, you can see directly through the sculpture, and it's a different medium, it's approached differently, but we can see how Dale's different aesthetic qualities still come through with something that seemingly you would think wouldn't mix together with the stone and the metal. But we still have these labyrinths inside. We see these different textures that have been layered on top of each other. And you can feel the movement, not only within the composition, but within the piece itself as your eye travels through. And as Dale has been experimenting more with these metal sculptures, he's gone about it in different ways as well. And some of those are featured throughout the exhibition too. Does anyone have any questions?
Well, what technology does he use to cut that? Is that like water jets or something?
I believe he said those are laser cut.
That's a lot of cutting.
Mm-hmm. And even more time consuming are all of the patterns that are on his limestone sculptures, because all of that is cut by hand.
It's cut by hand on those? Okay.
Yep.
But the laser cut is machine.
Yeah, the laser cut is the machine for the aluminum.
Wow.
Yep.
A lot of cutting.
Yes.
I also start to realize sculptures like where in Bloomington, Indiana? Is it on the main campus or is it around town?
Some of them are.
Like the one with the farmer's market, but how do you know where it's at? Like if I wanted to go and look.
Dale knows.
I have to contact him and say, where are they?
I don't know anything to tell you where they all are.
Yeah, I'm sure Bloomington has like a sculpture tour. A lot of different cities have that.
Okay, like Fort Wayne. Okay.
Yeah, but his are all over the place. I think he has one maybe on campus, but I think most of them are throughout the city. And he also has one that's very easy to find in Indianapolis outside the courthouse, and that's the time flow over here.
Oh, okay.
Where you can see how he's brought together the metal and the stone and lights as well. And he was saying how an acquaintance of his who works downtown in the building right in the courthouse said that this has become like a meeting place for people throughout downtown Indy.
I went all through grade school and high school with him in his class.
Oh, you did?
Every step of the way.
So you probably know more about Dale than even I do.
No, I mean, I remember him more in high school. He was an art kid, and stuff.
Oh, you went to school with him?
Bishop Lewis High School. Graduated in his class.
Not at this time, but
because he's a Fort Wayne music.
I know, maybe one day, but we don't have any of his public art at the moment. But we do have some of his work within our permanent collection, and those are actually out in the atrium where you guys were waiting. When you first walk in the front doors, immediately to your right, there's that thin limestone sculpture, and that is one of Dale's. And that one is a very good one where when you're looking at all the different lines, you start to see different shapes. There's bees, there's snakes, there's a man with his heart in the center, and that's one where we had it up over a year, and I was still finding new things whenever I would take tours and we would look at that sculpture. If only we could have brought that one in here. And with you noting that you went to school with Dale, this exhibition is kind of like a homecoming for him, and that's how he looked at it. That's how we looked at it as well, because we have models like the piece over there that was his first public work from the 80s, and then we have sculptures that he created within a couple months of the exhibition opening. So it's really a culmination of his career as an artist, and he was excited to be able to bring that back home to Fort Wayne.
I heard he came up here, you had an evening with Dale, but
He did.
I didn't find out about it till after, but I would have gone in a minute if I had known.
Yes, we did have an evening with Dale, and we did record his talk, and soon that will be posted online. So for like you or anyone else who wasn't able to see his talk, then you can still listen to him
And it'll
see
be
him.
online through this art museum? You
Yep,
can find
it'll
it?
be on our website.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would like that.
And we also had a Facebook Live with him a couple weeks ago that I think is still available online too. Yeah. Does anyone have any other questions?
Well, what's amazing about the large pieces of public art, you know, he's so detailed in his planning.
Yes.
But there's so many considerations, like the way the light is, you know, the sunlight, the shadows, and just the way the snow goes up against it. I mean, there just must be an infinite number of factors that he has to consider.
And he brings all of those factors into the creation, because he was here to install the exhibition, and he worked very closely with our technical team with lighting everything as well. So
You can see the lighting effect on just this.
Yes.
The shadows are amazing, really.
he leaves no stone unturned.
Interesting how I went from stone to this aluminum then. I never put the two together.
Yeah, and then in a lot of his regular sculptures as well, he has the juxtaposition of like the soft, appearing in comparison, the soft porous stone next to pieces of steel and aluminum, kind of playing at how those two different textures and different surfaces can interact with one another. Yeah.
Well, how does he create this? Is it like with a hammer and a chisel, literally?
Yep.
Because that was such a good cutout. You know, that one with the gap out, or that
Yep.
one of them. I'm like,
He-
how did he do that?
He does it by hand, like the old, when you think of an old sculptor, yeah.
Well, this, sorry to break in.
Oh, you're fine.
The alchemical studies, these 4 pieces were originally one piece. And as he worked,
No, it was one block.
it was one block as a cut-off piece, a scrap piece from the limestone quarries. And because it had these natural forms in it, which is he's gilded in gold now, when he broke it apart to create his version of alchemical studies, he left the natural version and highlighted that as well. So it's one rock for one piece.
Now he must saw down.
More
In
than likely.
between, you know, he cuts on it with a saw, I would assume.
Well, he works very closely with the quarries as well. It's like how Caitlin has said this was like a cut-off or a cast-off piece. It would have been something that they couldn't use for architecture or like a countertop or anything. So he would have then be able to purchase that.
But the nubs on the side, those metal parts, that's how he transports these pieces. And he has to use a car engine lift to pick them up. So while beautiful, they also have a practical purpose.
Yeah. And the more you look at them, the more you also keep seeing too. Do we have any more questions today? Do we have any Facebook questions, Caitlin?
They thank you for having a good tour.
You're welcome. Well, thank you everyone for joining us both here and on Facebook, and we hope to see more of you in the museum hopefully soon, and we just thank you for everyone joining us.